Frank retired at 63 with $2.1 million in his retirement accounts. He had contributed to those accounts for 31 years without stopping. Every paycheck. Every year. Even the year his wife lost her job. Even the year they replaced the roof. Even the years when the market was down 20% and contributing felt like dropping money into a fire. He never paused. He never redirected. He just kept going, because nobody had ever told him when to stop, so he assumed the answer was never. At 63, he stopped working and started drawing from the accounts. He and his wife lived on approximately $72,000 per year. His financial planner ran the projections. At his current withdrawal rate, with his Social Security income factored in, his money would last well past his life expectancy under nearly every realistic market scenario. He had more than enough. He had, by the planner's estimate, approximately $400,000 more than he needed to fund the retirement he actually wanted. He had oversaved. Not catastrophically. Not in a way that ruined his life. But he had contributed money to retirement accounts during years when that money, redirected elsewhere, could have paid off his mortgage earlier, funded his children's education without loans, or simply been spent on experiences during the decades when he was young enough and healthy enough to fully enjoy them. He had optimized for a number that turned out to be larger than necessary, and the cost of that over-optimization was a decade of tighter living than his actual situation required. Frank is not a cautionary tale about failure. He is a cautionary tale about the absence of a specific answer to a specific question. Now I want to tell you about his younger colleague, Raymond. Raymond is 51. He has $890,000 in retirement accounts. He contributes $1,800 per month. He has been contributing at this rate for 6 years and intends to continue until he retires at 67. He is on track, by his own calculation, to retire with approximately $2.6 million. But Raymond has a question he has never been able to get a clear answer to. He asked his HR department. He asked a financial advice website. He asked a friend who works in banking. He got different answers every time, none of them satisfying, none of them specific enough to actually use. The question is, at what point have I saved enough that I can stop contributing and redirect this money toward other things I want to do with my life right now? Nobody gave him a number. Nobody gave him a framework. Nobody gave him a moment. This video is about that moment. Pause. Music fades in softly. This isn't about whether you're saving enough. It's about the specific, calculable point at which your retirement savings become self-sustaining, the moment when compounding takes over and additional contributions become optional rather than essential, and why understanding this moment might be one of the most liberating financial realizations available to you. I'm going to show you the exact rules for identifying when you can stop contributing to retirement, the mathematical framework, the variables that change the calculation for your specific situation, the mistakes that cause people to either stop too early or contribute far longer than necessary, and the specific number that, once you hit it, means your retirement is essentially funded whether you contribute another dollar or not. These are the rules that financial planning books explain in 70 pages of technical language. I'm going to explain them in plain terms that you can actually use. Transition to core content. Rule 1, there is a specific dollar amount at which your retirement account becomes self-funding, and most people have never calculated what that number is for their own life. This is the foundational concept that makes everything else in this video possible. And it is simultaneously one of the most important and most underexplained ideas in personal finance. Here is the basic principle. At a sufficiently large account balance, the annual investment returns generated by the account, the growth produced by the money already inside it, exceed what you would be contributing annually anyway. At that point, your contributions are no longer the primary engine of growth. Compounding is. And if compounding is doing the work, the question of whether to continue contributing becomes a choice rather than a necessity. Here is the math that makes this concrete. If you have $600,000 in a retirement account earning an average of 7% annually, the account generates approximately $42,000 in growth per year. If you are contributing $12,000 per year, the account is growing $42,000 from compounding and $12,000 from your contributions, a ratio of roughly 3.5 to 1 in favor of compounding. Your contributions are real and meaningful, but they are no longer the dominant force in your account's growth. At $800,000, the same 7% return produces $56,000 in annual growth. At $1 million, it produces $70,000. At these levels, even if you stopped contributing entirely, the account would continue growing at a rate that may well be sufficient to fund your retirement, depending on your specific retirement income needs, your timeline to retirement, and the return assumptions you apply. The moment you can stop contributing is not a fixed number that applies to everyone. It is a personal calculation. But it is absolutely a calculable number. And most people have never done the calculation because nobody told them the calculation existed. Rule 2, the 25x rule tells you your retirement target, and working backward from that target tells you when your current balance becomes self-sustaining. The 25x rule is the most widely validated framework for determining retirement readiness. It comes from the Trinity study, a peer-reviewed analysis of historical portfolio performance, and it states that a portfolio equal to 25 times your annual retirement expenses can sustain a 4% annual withdrawal rate indefinitely across virtually all historical 30-year periods. Here is how it works in practice. If you need $60,000 per year in retirement to cover your expenses, your retirement target is $60,000 multiplied by 25, which equals $1,500,000. If your current account balance, projected forward at 7% annual returns with no additional contributions, will reach $1,500,000 by the time you retire, you are done. Not emotionally done, not psychologically done, but mathematically done. Additional contributions are building a buffer beyond what the math requires. Raymond's situation makes this concrete. He spends approximately $85,000 per year now. He expects to spend somewhat less in retirement, perhaps $70,000 annually, adjusted for no commuting costs, no mortgage by then, and children who are financially independent. His retirement target using the 25x rule is $70,000 multiplied by 25, which equals $1,750,000. He currently has $890,000. At 7% annual returns with no additional contributions, his balance will reach approximately $1,750,000 in roughly 11 years, when he is 62. He plans to retire at 67. Which means, if the math holds, his account becomes self-funding approximately 5 years before he retires. 5 years during which his $1,800 monthly contribution could be redirected to paying down his remaining mortgage, funding experiences, or simply increasing his current quality of life. But here's what most people miss. The 25x calculation typically doesn't include Social Security, which is a meaningful income stream for most workers. If Raymond's Social Security benefit at 67 is $2,200 per month, $26,400 per year, his portfolio only needs to generate $43,600 per year, not $70,000. Which means his actual portfolio target is $43,600 multiplied by 25, which equals $1,090,000. He will likely cross that threshold in approximately 7 years, at 58. 9 years before he retires. Including Social Security in this calculation changes everything. Most people don't include it. Rule 3, the crossover point, when your investment returns exceed your annual contributions, is the most meaningful milestone in your retirement savings journey, and almost nobody knows when they'll hit it. The crossover point is the specific moment when the annual growth your portfolio generates exceeds the annual contributions you're making. It is the moment compounding fully takes over as the primary driver of your account's growth. For Raymond, contributing $21,600 per year, the crossover point occurs when his account balance generates more than $21,600 in annual returns. At 7%, that requires a balance of approximately $309,000. He crossed that threshold some time ago. His account has been primarily self-growing for years. His contributions are supplemental at this point, meaningful, but not the primary growth engine. This matters because it reframes how you think about your contributions. Before the crossover point, your contributions are essential. You are the primary engine of your account's growth. Without them, the account grows slowly. After the crossover point, compounding is the primary engine. Your contributions are accelerants. They push the final number higher and make the timeline shorter, but the account will grow substantially even without them. The psychological insight here is important. Most people continue contributing at the same rate, with the same urgency, throughout their entire saving life, because the urgency they felt when contributions were essential never consciously updates when the math shifts. They are still driving with the same intensity on a highway that now has a tailwind. Recognizing the crossover point doesn't mean stopping. It means understanding the current state of your momentum and making a conscious choice about acceleration rather than a reflexive one. Rule 4. Stopping contributions too early is a real and common mistake, and the specific errors that cause it are worth understanding before you make them. This video is about when you can stop contributing. But equally important is being precise about the mistakes that cause people to stop too soon, because stopping too early can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in retirement security that you will desperately want back when you're 73 and the portfolio is running lower than projected. The most common error is using current balance as the benchmark rather than projected balance. If you have $600,000 today and your retirement target is $1,500,000, you are not 60% of the way there. You are much further along than that, because your current $600,000 will compound significantly between now and retirement. At 7% over 15 years, $600,000 becomes approximately $1,655,000 with no additional contributions. You may already be at or near your target. Stopping contributions now might be mathematically sound. But if you calculated only that $600,000 versus $1,500,000 and concluded you're 40% short, you might keep contributing unnecessarily for years. The second error is ignoring inflation in retirement expense projections. Your current $70,000 in annual expenses will not be $70,000 in 20 years. At 3% annual inflation, $70,000 today becomes approximately $126,000 in 20 years. If you're calculating your retirement target on current dollars without adjusting for inflation, you are likely underestimating what you'll need, which means stopping contributions based on that calculation leaves you short. The third error is sequence of returns risk. A portfolio that reaches its target balance 3 years before retirement and then experiences a significant market decline in those 3 years may fall well below target just as you're about to draw on it. The mathematical crossover point assumes average returns. Markets don't deliver average returns in neat annual increments. Buffer matters. And the appropriate buffer size is a function of your specific timeline, risk tolerance, and flexibility, not a fixed percentage that applies universally. Rule 5. Your retirement withdrawal rate is the variable that most directly determines how much you need, and most people use the wrong rate for their specific situation. The 4% withdrawal rate from the Trinity study is the most commonly cited retirement planning guideline. And for a 30-year retirement starting at 65, it is well supported by historical data. But it is not universally correct, and applying it without adjustment to your specific situation can lead you to either oversave significantly or retire with insufficient resources. If you retire at 55 and plan for a 40-year retirement, the 4% rule is too aggressive. Historical data suggests that a 3 to 3.5% withdrawal rate is more appropriate for longer retirements. This means your portfolio target is higher, 33 times annual expenses rather than 25, which changes both your target and the timeline to reaching it. If you retire at 70 with significant flexibility in your spending, a 5% withdrawal rate may be defensible. Your target is 20 times annual expenses rather than 25. Your required portfolio is smaller. You may reach it sooner than you think. The withdrawal rate you use determines your target. Your target determines when you can stop contributing. Using the wrong rate, specifically, using a rate calibrated for someone else's retirement timeline and spending flexibility, means your entire planning framework is built on a mismatched assumption. And a mismatched assumption, applied consistently over years of financial planning, produces outcomes that are either unnecessarily restrictive or genuinely insufficient. Rule 6. Tax diversification is a reason to keep contributing even after you've hit your number, and it's a reason almost nobody mentions when they discuss retirement contribution strategy. Here is the complexity that makes the "when to stop" question harder than the math alone suggests. Most people accumulate retirement savings primarily in traditional tax-deferred accounts, traditional 401(k)s, and traditional IRAs. These accounts grow tax-deferred but are taxed as ordinary income when you withdraw in retirement. If your balance is entirely in traditional accounts and you withdraw $70,000 per year in retirement, you pay income tax on that $70,000 every year. Roth accounts work differently. Contributions are made with after-tax dollars, but growth and qualified withdrawals are completely tax-free. A portfolio with meaningful Roth balances gives you tax flexibility in retirement, the ability to manage your taxable income in any given year by choosing which accounts to draw from. The practical implication for the "when to stop contributing" question is this: even if your total retirement balance has reached the mathematical target, you might continue making Roth contributions specifically, not to build more wealth but to improve the tax structure of your existing wealth. Converting traditional balances to Roth or continuing Roth contributions extends the tax-free portion of your portfolio, reduces your future required minimum distributions, and gives you strategic flexibility in retirement that a purely traditional account portfolio cannot provide. I'm not done yet. Required minimum distributions, the mandatory annual withdrawals the IRS requires from traditional accounts starting at age 73, can force you to take taxable income you don't want or need in a given year, potentially pushing you into a higher tax bracket and affecting Medicare premium calculations. A larger Roth balance reduces your RMD burden. Continued Roth contributions or conversions, even after reaching your portfolio target, can be a financially sound strategy that has nothing to do with building more wealth and everything to do with keeping more of the wealth you've already built. Rule 7, the employer match changes the calculation entirely, and walking away from a match before you've stopped working is almost always a financial mistake. This rule is simple, absolute, and consistently violated. If your employer matches your retirement contributions, any percentage, any amount, the match represents an immediate, guaranteed, risk-free return on your contribution equal to the match percentage. A 50% match on contributions up to 6% of your salary is a 50% immediate return. No investment available anywhere reliably produces a 50% immediate return. This means that even if you've reached the mathematical point where additional contributions are not necessary to fund your retirement, stopping contributions before you stop working, while you are still eligible for the employer match, is leaving guaranteed money on the table. The match transforms the contribution from a wealth-building action into a compensation question. You are not deciding whether to save more. You are deciding whether to collect a portion of your compensation that requires a specific action to receive. The correct application of this rule is straightforward. The moment you stop working is the moment you stop receiving the match. Before that moment, contribute at least enough to capture the full match regardless of your portfolio's position relative to your retirement target. The match alone justifies the contribution even when the contribution itself is not mathematically necessary. But here's what most people miss. This rule applies even in the years immediately before retirement. A 64-year-old with a fully funded retirement portfolio who is still receiving a 50% employer match on contributions should still be contributing enough to capture that match. The matched dollars go into the account. The account distributes them at retirement. The return on that action is 50%, immediate, guaranteed. There is no rational argument for leaving it behind. Rule 8, Cost-FI is the concept that answers Raymond's question, and understanding it transforms how you think about the relationship between contributions and financial freedom. Cost-FI, sometimes called coast-fire, is a specific financial concept that has gained significant traction in financial independence communities and deserves significantly more attention in mainstream personal finance. The concept is this. At a certain portfolio balance, if you stop contributing entirely and simply allow compounding to work uninterrupted until your retirement age, your portfolio will reach your retirement target on its own. You have coasted to financial independence. Your current balance, compounding forward at a reasonable rate of return, closes the gap to your target without any additional input from you. The Coast-FI number is a specific calculation. Take your retirement target, your 25x number, and discount it back to the present using your expected rate of return and your years until retirement. The result is the portfolio balance at which you can stop contributing and still reach your target. Here is how Raymond's calculation works. His retirement target, accounting for Social Security, is $1,090,000. He plans to retire in 16 years. Discounting $1,090,000 back 16 years at 7% produces a present value of approximately $367,000. Raymond has $890,000, more than twice his Coast-FI number. He passed his Coast-FI threshold years ago. This means Raymond could stop contributing to retirement today, redirect his $1,800 monthly contribution to other priorities, paying off debt, funding experiences, building taxable investments for flexibility, and his existing portfolio, growing at 7% for 16 years, would reach approximately $2,660,000 by retirement, well above his $1,090,000 target. The hidden consequence of not knowing your Coast-FI number is that you may be sacrificing current quality of life for retirement savings you mathematically don't need. That sacrifice is admirable. It is also, beyond a certain point, unnecessary. An unnecessary sacrifice is not virtue. It is the absence of information. Rule 9, stopping contributions doesn't mean stopping financial intentionality, and the money freed up needs a clear destination or it disappears into lifestyle rather than serving your actual goals. This is the rule that makes the theoretical answer practical. When Raymond stops contributing $1,800 per month to retirement, that $1,800 doesn't evaporate. It remains in his cash flow. And cash flow without a designated purpose has a reliable tendency to disappear into the ambient spending of daily life without producing any particular improvement in quality of life or financial security. The decision to stop or reduce retirement contributions should always be accompanied by a simultaneous decision about where those dollars go instead. The options are meaningful and distinct. They include paying down remaining mortgage debt, which produces a guaranteed return equal to the mortgage interest rate. They include building a taxable brokerage account, which provides investment growth with greater liquidity and flexibility than retirement accounts. They include funding specific near-term goals, a child's remaining education costs, a meaningful experience, a home improvement. They include simply increasing current quality of life in ways that align with what genuinely matters. The key is that each of these is a deliberate choice producing a specific outcome. The alternative, allowing the freed cash flow to diffuse into lifestyle without intention, produces an outcome that is difficult to trace and impossible to evaluate. You won't be able to point to what the money built. You'll just have a vague sense that things got a little easier for a while. The practical action is to write down, before you change your contribution, exactly where the redirected money is going and what it will produce. Not approximately. Specifically. Account numbers, dollar amounts, expected outcomes. The decision to stop contributing should be as deliberate as the decision to start. Rule 10, the psychological difficulty of stopping contributions is real, and it can cause people to continue a behavior that is no longer necessary simply because the behavior has become their financial identity. This is the rule that Frank embodied without knowing it. Frank contributed to retirement for 31 years. The contribution was not just a financial behavior. It was part of how he understood himself as a financially responsible person. Stopping felt dangerous. It felt like the kind of thing people who hadn't saved enough did. It felt like giving up on a practice that had defined his financial life for 3 decades. So he kept going. Past the point where the math required it. Past the point where the returns were still meaningful relative to his needs. He contributed because stopping felt wrong, even when the numbers said stopping was fine. The psychological insight here is that financial behaviors, when sustained for long enough, become identity-based rather than outcome-based. You don't contribute to retirement because you've calculated that you need to. You contribute because you are a person who contributes to retirement. And identity-based behaviors are significantly more resistant to change than outcome-based behaviors, even when the outcome no longer justifies the behavior. Recognizing this pattern is the first step to escaping it. The question is not whether you are a responsible person who saves for retirement. The question is whether the specific action of contributing to your retirement account at your current rate is the best use of those dollars given your current financial position and your actual goals. Those are different questions. And the first one, am I responsible, is not the one you should be answering when you review your contribution rate. Rule 11, the exact moment you can stop contributing to retirement is when your current balance, compounded forward at a conservative rate to your retirement age, meets or exceeds your retirement income target, adjusted for inflation, inclusive of Social Security, and with an appropriate withdrawal rate for your specific retirement length. This is the synthesis. The specific answer to the specific question. Not a feeling. Not a benchmark. Not a comparison to what your colleagues have. A calculation. Your retirement income need, multiplied by the appropriate withdrawal multiple for your retirement length, gives you your portfolio target. Your Social Security projection reduces the amount that portfolio needs to generate. Discounting that adjusted target back to the present at a conservative return assumption gives you your cost-FI number. If your current balance exceeds your cost-FI number, additional contributions to retirement are accelerants, not essentials. Frank's number, had anyone calculated it for him, would have told him he could reduce contributions significantly in his late 50s without any risk to his retirement security. Raymond's number tells him he crossed the threshold years ago. Your number is specific to your income need, your Social Security projection, your retirement age, and your current balance. The calculation takes about 30 minutes with a spreadsheet or a financial calculator. It is not complicated. But it requires knowing that the calculation exists, knowing what inputs to use, and having the clarity of purpose to run it honestly rather than defaulting to the institutional message that more is always better. More is not always better. More than enough is just more. Transition to closing. Frank and Raymond are in different chapters of the same story. Frank has finished his career with more than he needed, and his life was good. He doesn't regret the saving. He does, occasionally, think about the decade when his kids were teenagers and money was tighter than it needed to be, when a reduced contribution would have funded the family trips they didn't take and the college costs that required loans he co-signed. He thinks about that sometimes. Not with devastation. With the specific, quiet awareness of someone who made the best decision he knew how to make with the information he had. Raymond has the information Frank didn't have. He knows his cost-FI number. He knows his account crossed it years ago. He knows that his $1,800 monthly contribution is building a retirement that will be $400,000 to $600,000 larger than his target, money he will almost certainly not spend in his lifetime, money that will sit in accounts his children will inherit without ever having been used for anything Raymond actually wanted to do. He hasn't stopped contributing yet. He's still deciding. He's thinking about the mortgage he could pay off in 3 years. He's thinking about a sabbatical he's been considering for a decade. He's thinking about the specific, concrete things that the $1,800 could build in his current life rather than in a retirement account that has already won the race it was entered in. The decision is his. It should be his. It is a personal decision that depends on his specific values, his specific flexibility, and his specific vision of what the next chapter of his life looks like. But it is now an informed decision. Not a default. Not an institutional assumption. Not the reflexive continuation of a behavior that was essential at 30 and maybe optional at 51. The exact moment you can stop contributing to retirement is not a mystery. It is a number. Your number. Calculable, specific, and available to you the moment you decide to look for it. The only question is whether you'll do the math. And whether you'll trust what it tells you. OUTRO, calm, deliberate, no rush. End card. If this video gave you a framework you've never had before, share it with one person who's been contributing on autopilot without knowing whether they still need to. The next video in this series walks through the exact spreadsheet calculation for finding your cost-fi number, your specific number, with your specific variables, in under 30 minutes.